And then, but one of the common themes is really thinking about building these cities from the inside out. So really focusing in their historical trajectories, their geographical perspectives. You know, what features of their economy are driven by broader globalization processes? To what extent are particular features driven more by, you know, unique nation-state restructuring policies around the offloading of certain services to the local level? And then to what extent are other dimensions of their economy just a unique factor of the history of the place? So, you know, I think there's ways of organizing that to sort of get a better handle on it. So I want to just turn now, because we have about, would you say 15 minutes left?
A presentation.
A presentation, yeah. To my own research on what I have called the creative food economy. And just to sort of give you a sense of how I did find this way of thinking helpful for trying to conceptualize what I saw as a rapid change in the way our food system was, and our economy was working. We know that there is right now going on this kind of fresh food revolution, and certainly Michelle Obama is leading the charge with things like your White House Garden. And actually, if anyone's interested in the rapid food policy changes that are happening in the US right now, I would recommend you go to Obama Foodorama. It's a great blog, but it actually is a daily sort of blog of changes, policy changes that are occurring, which are quite phenomenal when you think about the more traditional agro-industrial food system that the US is known for. In many ways, what we have found in our own research is that this fresh food revolution is actually consumer-led. People are becoming increasingly aware of food's capacity to embed local jobs and shape a place's social, environmental, and economic sustainability. What we found in our own research in the Toronto area, a 5-year SSHRC-led project that I did with my colleague Alison Blake Palmer, is it really seemed to be a creative consumer-led phenomenon that was inspiring the industry itself to change for the better. I think we have to recognize that Ontario has a very important food industry. Just some basic facts to put it in perspective. The food economy in Ontario is the second largest manufacturing sector. Ontario has the most diverse food system in the world. There are 200 agricultural commodities. We export $8.5 billion worth of commodities a year. Half of Canada's top-rated food and beverage firms are headquartered in Toronto. We have 113,395 firms and farms, creating 726,200 jobs. We have Cadbury, Schweppes, Campbell's, Heinz, Kellogg's, Kraft, PepsiCo, Unilever, Maple Leaf. We actually are known for our strength in high fructose corn syrup, which I'm not sure if that's something we want to be too proud of, given that some jurisdictions are banning it. But anyway, it just gives you a context. So we've got that side of the economy, the craft economy, which I've argued in other papers, but we also have what's called this C, this craft, artisanal, small-scale, small and medium-sized enterprises that are really responding to consumer, knowledge-intensive consumers. And one of the things we found in these consumer studies that it wasn't just yuppie chow, it wasn't just sort of high-end consumers who are concerned about these things, but it really crossed a cross-class boundary in terms of more people concerned about the environmental health and social and political aspects linked to food. What we found, and this is something that I think I want to stress with why I think the creative economy was such a helpful way into thinking about different economies or regions, is that it required us to think of a new way of measuring change or measuring what was happening on the ground. So the work that Kelvin Stoller did, for example, when he was coming up with these new indexes, it was like, well, there's something happening here, and traditional statistical measures aren't telling us enough about what's happening, so let's try new ways of measuring. So for us, Alison and I, we found that the traditional agricultural indicators, the way we traditionally thought of agriculture in terms of pigs and dairy, it wasn't helpful in terms of trying to capture what we were actually witnessing on the ground and when we were talking to people. So we actually developed a database of over 14 companies that were small and medium-sized enterprises that had really taken off in the last 10 to 15 years, and we had all these indicators of, various dimensions of what they thought was new and innovative. And then we've done over 500 interviews, and we were really trying to document the whole food supply chain. So we looked at producers, producer processors, distributors, distributor retailers, restaurants, government industry, research institutes, the whole sort of gamut, to try and capture what was going on here. And we had all these surveys where we asked all these companies about, what were their motivations for getting into the business, what were sort of examples of innovation that were happening in their products or in their processes. And it seemed that the very entrepreneurs that were in these companies were also echoing what they themselves were consumers, and they had talked about the concern in general about all these things: poor food quality, food safety, the fact that American agribusiness isn't so much about food as it is about the commodities that require the outlay of so much energy to become food. So this concern around carbon footprints, which is huge now actually in the UK, and a colleague of mine just sent me some fabulous work on that, which I can share with you if you're interested. All these things. One of my brilliant PhD students, Melanie Medor, is just finishing up her PhD thesis on urban food deserts. So she's been looking at how the sort of global restructuring of the food system has led to less and less access for a lot of people in cities. In Detroit, I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but it lost its last grocery store just last year. So the whole city actually doesn't even have a grocery store. So there's all these food issues that everybody's thinking about, which was sort of motivating these companies to seek, and consumers to seek food with more nutrition, better taste, fewer synthetic ingredients, these kinds of things. And what we discovered actually in our research as we kept digging around was how many of the Ontario funds were actually at the forefront in terms of trying to respond to all these concerns and seek seekers. So for example, the two Ontario cheese companies that recently won top honors at the US Super Cheese Bowl for their high quality food, and both of them happen to be you can buy their cheese in many stores in Kingston. They're just down in Prince Edward County. And in many ways, I'm hesitant to make this a promo for Prince Edward County because I know it gets a lot of good press, but at the same time, it really is a fascinating case study because it really is leading the province in terms of this green economic transformation with the work of people like Big Down Cheese and their LEED certified plant that is very much rooted in knowledge of the history of agriculture in the region, but also responding to new consumer demands. And this is where I realized that it's for simplistic reasons. To simplify, you can actually sort of segregate out the food economy into these two different camps, recognizing, of course, there's lots of crossover, but for purposes of public policy, thinking about how can we, encourage a more sustainable food system, you can actually sort of theorize about the creative food economy as being a shift from an old industrial craft economy to a newer craft economy. So the sources of economic power in the old craft economy, much more centralized, concentrated farmers' control of land. In the new craft economy, yes, it's still centralized to some extent, but there's also a knowledge that's now being passed on to individual, highly creative knowledge workers and extra firm institutions. Quality is measured differently. In the old economy, it's measured in terms of highly processed environments or incremental innovation. I think there's at least 27 different kinds of Oreo cookies, or even more. My kids like to let me know. But how innovative really is that when quality is also can now be a measure of taste, terroir, or the talent of the entrepreneurs making new and innovative products. And then this is where I find it most exciting from a regional economic development point. This last point is that enterprises' attitudes towards place is shifting. So that in the old craft economy, the firm, of course, is still located to traditional production inputs like raw land, transportation networks, but there's really little relationship